The starship Vanguard drifted silently through the endless void of space, its sleek metallic surface glinting faintly under the light of a distant star. Inside the ship, Captain Ethan Cole sat in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the jungle planet Zorath 7 loomed closer. The planet was a swirling mass of greens and blues, its thick atmosphere hiding mysteries that had intrigued Earth's scientists for years. For Ethan, this mission wasn't just about exploration. It was about proving humanity's worth to the galaxy. Ethan was a man of average height with short brown hair and a calm demeanor that masked his sharp mind. He had spent most of his life traveling through space, always searching for something greater than himself. Beside him stood Dr. Rachel Myers, the team's biologist. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, and her blue eyes sparkled with curiosity as she studied the readings from the ship's sensors. "Looks like we've got a lot of plant life down there," she said, her voice steady but excited. "This could be one of the most biodiverse planets we've ever encountered." As the Vanguard entered Zorath 7's orbit, the crew prepared for landing. The planet's surface was covered in dense jungles, towering trees reaching toward the sky like ancient sentinels. But what made Zorath 7 truly unique was its inhabitants, the Krillos, an advanced alien species known for their insectoid appearance and disdain for weaker civilizations. The Krillos were tall, with exoskeletons that shimmered like polished metal, and their large, multifaceted eyes seemed to pierce through everything they looked at. When the Vanguard touched down on a clearing near one of the Krillos cities, Ethan and his team stepped out cautiously. The air was humid and thick with the scent of unknown vegetation. Before long, a group of Krillos approached, their movements precise and deliberate. Leading them was Kralfix, the Krillos' leader. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, carrying an undertone of arrogance. "You are humans," he said, his words translated by the universal communicator devices both sides wore. "We have heard of your kind. Fragile, primitive, and insignificant." Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled politely and held up a small container. Inside was a single seedling of Solanum vitae, a genetically modified plant created by Earth's scientists. "This is a gift from my people," Ethan explained. "It's a plant that can adapt to any environment, producing oxygen and nutrients wherever it grows. We thought it might interest you." Kralfix tilted his head, examining the tiny plant with obvious skepticism. "A plant?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "You bring us a plant? How quaint. Our own bioengineering far surpasses such primitive creations." The other Krillos chuckled softly, their laughter echoing eerily in the humid air. Rachel frowned but remained silent, sensing the tension. Ethan, however, kept his composure. "Don't underestimate it," he replied calmly. "Sometimes the simplest things can have the greatest impact." Kralfix sneered, clearly unimpressed. "Very well," he said, taking the container from Ethan. "We will study your gift, but do not expect gratitude. To us, this is little more than a curiosity." With that, the Krillos turned and walked away, leaving Ethan and his team standing in the shadow of the alien city. As they returned to the Vanguard, Rachel broke the silence. "Do you think they'll actually take it seriously?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Ethan shrugged. "Probably not," he admitted. "But sometimes all it takes is planting a seed, literally and figuratively. Let's see what happens." Little did they know, that tiny seedling would grow into something far beyond anyone's expectations. What the Krillos dismissed as weakness would soon become their greatest challenge, and perhaps their greatest lesson. The Krillos wasted no time dismissing the tiny plant Ethan had given them. Kralfix handed the container to his chief scientist, Vinar, with an air of indifference. "Analyze this. Curiosity," Kralfix instructed, his mandibles clicking in annoyance. "If it holds any value, report back. If not, dispose of it." Vinar, a younger Krillos with a more curious mind than most of his kind, accepted the task reluctantly. Though he shared his leader's skepticism, Something about the human plant intrigued him. Its leaves were small and delicate, almost fragile, but there was a strange resilience in the way it stood upright despite its size. He couldn't help but wonder what secrets it might hold. Back on the Vanguard, Ethan and his crew prepared to leave Zoreth 7. As the ship lifted off, Rachel Myers stared out the window at the planet below. "Do you think they'll even bother studying it?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Ethan shrugged as he adjusted the controls. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But we did our part. Whether they take it seriously or not is up to them." Jake Harper, the pilot, chimed in from the cockpit. "Still feels like a waste of time if you ask me. Those bugs don't seem too interested in anything we have to offer." Rachel sighed. "Let's just hope they don't regret ignoring us later." Meanwhile, on Zoreth 7, Vinar began his analysis of Solanum vitae. At first, the plant seemed unremarkable. It required water, sunlight, and nutrients, basic elements found in any environment. But within days, something unusual happened. The seedling began to grow at an astonishing rate, sprouting new leaves and sending roots deep into the soil of the Krillos laboratory. Vinar watched in awe as the once tiny plant transformed into a thriving organism, adapting effortlessly to its surroundings. Word of the plant's rapid growth reached Kralthix, who demanded an explanation. When Vinar reported his findings, the leader scoffed. "So it grows quickly," Kralthix said dismissively. "What use is that? Our own creations can do far more impressive things." Despite his words, Kralthix ordered the plant to be moved outside, hoping it would thrive in the natural environment of Zoreth 7, and perhaps prove useful after all. Once planted in the wild, Solanum vitae flourished even faster. Within weeks, it had spread across a large section of the jungle, intertwining with native plants and overtaking them. The Krillos observed this development with mild interest, noting how the plant improved air quality and produced edible fruits. Some even began to see potential benefits, though Kralthix remained unconvinced. "It's still just a plant," he muttered during one meeting. "Nothing extraordinary." But Vinar wasn't so sure. As he continued monitoring the plant, he noticed subtle changes in the ecosystem around it. Native vegetation near Solanum vitae began to wilt and die, unable to compete with its aggressive growth. Strange patterns emerged in the soil, as if the plant's roots were altering its chemical composition. Even more alarming, metallic structures nearby, tools and equipment left by the Krillos, showed signs of corrosion where the plant's roots touched them. Vinar decided to run tests on the soil and discovered something shocking. Solanum vitae wasn't just growing, it was consuming. Its roots released enzymes that broke down organic matter and certain metals, absorbing them for nourishment. This explained why it grew so rapidly and why other plants struggled to survive near it. Vinar realized the implications immediately. If left unchecked, the plant could disrupt entire ecosystems and possibly threaten the Krillos themselves. He tried to warn Kralthix, presenting his findings during a council meeting. "This plant is dangerous," Vinar insisted. "It consumes resources at an unsustainable rate. If it continues to spread, it could overwhelm our world." Kralthix listened impatiently before cutting him off. "You're overreacting," he snapped. "A simple plant cannot harm us. We are the dominant species here, and your fears are unfounded. Focus on more important matters." Dismissed and frustrated, Vinar returned to his lab. He knew Kralthix wouldn't listen, but someone had to act. Desperate, he accessed the Krillos' communication systems and sent a message to the Vanguard, hoping Ethan and his crew would return. "Please come back," he wrote. "Your plant is spreading uncontrollably. We need your help." For now, the Krillos ignored the growing threat, confident in their superiority. But deep in the jungle, Solanum vitae continued its relentless expansion, silently weaving its way into the fabric of Zoreth 7. And somewhere among the towering trees, Vinar waited anxiously, praying the humans would heed his warning before it was too late. Weeks passed, and the Solanum vitae continued to spread across Zorith-7. The plant's growth was relentless, covering vast areas of the jungle with thick vines and enormous leaves. At first, many Krillos dismissed it as a harmless oddity, but soon they began to notice changes in their environment. The air smelled different, richer, almost too heavy to breathe comfortably. Streams that once flowed clear were now murky, their waters tainted by strange substances. Even the weather seemed off, with sudden storms rolling in more frequently than before. Vinar spent every waking moment studying the plant, his concern growing with each passing day. He documented how the roots of Solanum vitae stretched deep into the ground, breaking apart rocks and absorbing minerals at an alarming rate. Nearby plants struggled to survive, their nutrients stolen by the invasive species. What troubled him most, however, was the effect on Krillos technology. Metal tools and equipment left near the plant showed signs of corrosion, rusting away as if eaten by some unseen force. Kralthix, meanwhile, refused to acknowledge the danger. When Vinar tried to present his findings again, the leader waved him off impatiently. "You waste time on this trivial matter," Kralthix said, his voice sharp and dismissive. "Our world is strong. A mere plant cannot harm us." But not all Krillos shared Kralthix's arrogance. Some workers who labored in the fields reported feeling weaker after spending time near the plant. Others claimed their machines malfunctioned without explanation. Rumors spread among the population, whispering of a creeping threat no one could fully understand. Yet fear of speaking out kept most silent, unwilling to challenge their leader's authority. On board the Vanguard, Ethan Cole and his crew received Vinar's urgent message. Rachel read it aloud in the ship's meeting room, her voice tense. "He says the plant is spreading uncontrollably and consuming resources. He thinks it could destroy their ecosystem if we don't intervene." Jake Harper leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Sounds like they're finally realizing what happens when you mess with nature. Maybe this'll teach them not to mock us next time." Ethan frowned, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "It's not about teaching them a lesson. If that plant gets out of control, it could devastate their entire planet, and maybe even spread beyond it. We need to go back and see what we can do." Lisa Carter, the engineer, nodded in agreement. "We created Solanum vitae. It's our responsibility to fix this." With little debate, the crew set a course for Zorith-7. As the Vanguard descended through the planet's atmosphere, they noticed the landscape had changed dramatically since their last visit. Thick green vines snaked across the ground, climbing trees and buildings alike. The jungle seemed darker, denser, as though the plant had swallowed the light itself. When they landed, Vinar was waiting for them. His large eyes reflected both relief and anxiety as he greeted Ethan. "Thank you for coming," he said quickly. "The situation is worse than I feared. The plant grows faster every day, and nothing we do slows it down." Ethan stepped forward, his expression serious. "Tell us everything you've observed. We need to understand what's happening here." Vinar led them to a nearby research station, where he showed them samples of corroded metal and damaged soil. "The plant consumes everything around it," he explained. "It breaks down organic material, minerals, even certain metals, and it adapts. It learns how to survive in new conditions faster than anything I've ever seen." Rachel examined the samples closely, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This isn't normal behavior for Solanum vitae," she said quietly. "Something must have triggered this mutation. Maybe the conditions here are different from Earth." Ethan looked at Vinar. "Is there any way to contain it? Any weak points we can exploit?" Vinar hesitated, clearly unsure. "I don't know," he admitted. "But if we don't act soon, it may be too late." As the group discussed their options, a distant rumble shook the ground. Outside, the jungle seemed alive with movement, the vines of Solanum vitae twisting and stretching, reaching further into the horizon. It was clear the plant wasn't just surviving. It was thriving, feeding on the very world it had invaded. For the first time, Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He had brought this plant to Zorath 7, hoping to share something valuable with another species. Instead, he might have unleashed a catastrophe. Determined to make things right, he turned to his team. "Let's get to work," he said firmly. "We've got a lot to figure out, and not much time to do it." Ethan and his crew worked tirelessly alongside Vinar, trying to understand the mutated Solanum vitae. The research station buzzed with activity as Rachel analyzed soil samples, Lisa examined corroded metal fragments, and Jake helped set up monitoring equipment around the jungle. Despite their efforts, the plant's growth showed no signs of slowing. Every hour brought new reports of its spread. Entire fields overtaken, rivers clogged with thick vines, and even sections of Krylos infrastructure crumbling under the weight of its roots. Viner grew increasingly desperate. "We're running out of time," he said one evening, pacing back and forth in the lab. "If we don't stop it soon, it will consume everything. Our cities, our food sources, even our people." Rachel looked up from her microscope, her expression grim. "This isn't just a plant anymore," she said. "It's like it's alive in ways we didn't expect. Adapting, learning, almost as if it has a purpose." Ethan nodded slowly. "We need to find its weak point. There has to be something we can use against it." He turned to Vinar. "What about your scientists? Have they found anything useful?" Vinar shook his head. Most of them refuse to take this seriously. They think it's beneath them to focus on a primitive organism. "Only a few are helping me, but we lack the resources to make real progress." Lisa raised her hand slightly, drawing everyone's attention. "What if we target its roots?" "From what I've seen, the plant relies heavily on its root system to absorb nutrients. If we can disrupt that, maybe we can slow it down." "It's worth a try," Ethan agreed. "But how do we get close enough? Those vines are everywhere, and they seem to react when disturbed." Jake chimed in, leaning against the wall. "We could use drones to map out the root network. Once we know where the main clusters are, we can figure out the best way to attack them." The group quickly got to work. Using small robotic drones equipped with cameras and sensors, they mapped the dense jungle, identifying areas where the roots were thickest. The data revealed a massive underground web connecting the entire infestation. At the center of it all was a single massive root cluster, a kind of heart for the plant. "This is it," Rachel said, pointing to the image on the screen. "Massively intertwined root system. This must be controlling the rest of the plant. If we destroy this, we might be able to kill it." But reaching the core wouldn't be easy. The area was deep within the jungle, surrounded by thick vines and unstable terrain. Worse, Kralthix still refused to believe the plant posed any real threat. When Ethan requested assistance from the Krylos military, the leader dismissed him outright. "You humans brought this problem here," Kralthix sneered during their meeting. "Fix it yourselves. Do not waste my time with your incompetence." Frustrated but undeterred, Ethan decided to move forward without Krylos' help. "We'll handle this ourselves," he told his team. "We've faced worse odds before." As preparations continued, Vinar made a bold decision. Knowing that Ethan and his crew couldn't succeed alone, he secretly gathered a small group of sympathetic Krylos workers who had witnessed the plant's destruction firsthand. Together, they devised a plan to sabotage key pieces of Krylos machinery near the infested zones, forcing the leadership to take action. The sabotage worked, but not without consequences. When Kralthix discovered Vinar's involvement, he ordered the scientist arrested. As guards dragged Vinar away, he shouted to Ethan, "You have to stop it. Don't let pride blind you like it has them." Ethan watched helplessly as Vinar was taken, guilt weighing heavily on him. The young Krylos had risked everything to warn humanity, and now paid the price. Determined to honor his sacrifice, Ethan rallied his team. "We owe it to him to finish this," he said firmly. "Let's move out." Under the cover of darkness, Ethan, Rachel, Lisa, and Jake ventured into the jungle, heading toward the heart of the infestation. The vines swayed eerily around them, as though sensing their presence. Every step felt heavier than the last, the air thick with tension. When they finally reached the massive root cluster, Rachel gasped. Towering above them was a pulsating mass of intertwined roots, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It looked more like a living creature than a plant. "This is it," Ethan whispered. "Now or never." As they prepared to deploy their plan, the ground trembled violently. The plants seemed to sense their intent, lashing out with thick vines that whipped through the air. The battle to save Zoreth 7 had begun, and failure was not an option. The team stood frozen as the massive root cluster pulsed with energy, its glowing tendrils writhing like living creatures. Thick vines shot out from the ground, lashing at the air around them. Ethan quickly snapped out of his shock and shouted orders. "Stay close. We need to get to the core before it reacts further." Rachel pulled a small device from her belt, a prototype chemical disperser designed to weaken plant matter. "If we can inject this into the main root, it might disrupt the plant system," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. Lysa nodded, adjusting the settings on her handheld cutter. "I'll clear a path. Just keep moving forward." Jake raised his rifle, scanning the area for movement. "Be ready for anything," he warned. "This thing isn't just growing, it's fighting back." As they moved closer to the pulsating mass, the vines grew more aggressive, whipping toward them with alarming speed. Lysa fired up her cutter, slicing through the smaller vines that blocked their way. The smell of burnt plant material filled the air, sharp and acrid. Despite her steady hands, even Lysa couldn't hide the tension in her face. "This is insane," she muttered under her breath. "It's like it knows what we're trying to do." Ethan focused on keeping the group together, his eyes darting between the writhing vines and the glowing core ahead. "We're almost there," he called out, urging them forward. But the closer they got, the harder the plant fought. A thick vine suddenly lunged at Rachel, wrapping tightly around her leg. She cried out, dropping the chemical disperser as she struggled to free herself. "Hold on," Jake yelled, firing his weapon at the vine. The blast severed it cleanly, and Rachel stumbled backward, clutching her leg. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her voice wavered. Picking up the disperser, she limped onward, determination etched on her face. Finally, they reached the base of the massive root cluster. Ethan grabbed the disperser from Rachel and examined it briefly. "We only have one shot at this," he said, his tone grim. "If we miss, we won't get another chance." Lysa stepped forward, using her cutter to carve a deep groove into the largest root. "Here, inject it here," she shouted, pointing to the exposed section. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pressed the disperser against the groove and activated it, releasing a concentrated stream of chemicals into the plant system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground shook violently, and the entire root cluster began to glow brighter. The vines thrashed wildly, as if the plant were screaming in pain. Ethan and his team stumbled backward, shielding their faces from the blinding light. "Did it work?" Jake asked, shouting over the noise. "I think so," Rachel replied, squinting at the chaotic scene. The chemical should be breaking down its structure from the inside. But their relief was short-lived. The shaking intensified, and chunks of the root cluster started to collapse, sending debris flying in all directions. "We need to get out of here," Ethan yelled, grabbing Rachel's arm and pulling her toward safety. Lysa and Jake followed closely, dodging falling vines and scrambling over uneven terrain. As they retreated, the jungle seemed to come alive around them. Smaller plants wilted and died, sucked dry by the dying giant. The air grew thick with dust and the stench of decay. By the time they reached the edge of the infested zone, the team was exhausted but alive. Behind them, the heart of the Solanum Vita crumbled into a heap of dead roots and ash. For the first time in weeks, the jungle fell silent. Ethan looked back at the destruction, his expression a mix of triumph and sorrow. "We did it," he said quietly. "But at what cost?" Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. "We stopped it from spreading further. That's what matters." Unbeknownst to them, however, not all traces of the plant were gone. Deep beneath the surface, a single seed remained buried in the soil, dormant but alive. The jungle may have been saved, for now, but the thread of Solanum vitae lingered, waiting for the right moment to awaken again. The teen returned to the Krillos city, battered and weary but victorious. The jungle was quiet now, the once rampant Solanum vitae reduced to a lifeless mass of roots and ash. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and unease as they approached the towering alien structures. Despite their success, he couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. Kralfix awaited them in the central plaza, his exoskeleton gleaming under the dim sunlight filtering through the thick atmosphere. His mandibles clicked impatiently as Ethan and his crew stepped forward. "You claim to have stopped the plant," Kralfix said, his voice cold and skeptical. "Yet much of our world lies in ruins because of your actions." Ethan met the leader's gaze without flinching. "We didn't create this disaster. You did, by ignoring the warnings. If you had listened sooner, maybe none of this would have happened." Kralfix's eyes narrowed, anger flickering behind his multifaceted lenses. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out. Instead, he turned his attention to Rachel. "Your chemical weapon. It destroyed the plant, yes, but at what cost? Our soil is poisoned, our rivers tainted. How do we recover from this?" Rachel hesitated before answering. The chemicals were designed to target Solanum vitae specifically. Over time, the ecosystem should heal itself. But it will take work and patience. "Patience," Kralfix snapped. "Our people are starving, our cities crumbling. We do not have the luxury of waiting." Before tensions could escalate further, Vinar appeared, escorted by 2 Krillos guards. His appearance startled everyone, his body bruised and his movements slow, but his determination unwavering. "Enough," he said firmly, addressing Kralfix. "This is not the time for blame. The humans saved us when no one else could. Do not dishonor their sacrifice with your pride." The crowd of Krillos gathered around fell silent, shocked by Vinar's boldness. Kralfix glared at him, but said nothing, clearly struggling to maintain control. Finally, he turned back to Ethan. "Very well," he muttered reluctantly. "You have done what we could not. But know this, if your kind ever brings such danger to our world again, there will be consequences." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Understood. But remember, we're stronger when we work together. Arrogance nearly cost you everything." With the immediate crisis resolved, the team prepared to leave Zoreth 7. As they walked back to the Vanguard, Vinar joined them, insisting on accompanying them aboard the ship. "I cannot stay here," he explained. "My people see me as a traitor now, but perhaps I can learn from yours." Ethan studied the young scientist for a moment before nodding. "You'll always have a place with us," he said. "Knowledge is meant to be shared, not hoarded." As the Vanguard lifted off, the crew looked down at the scared planet below. The jungle was already showing signs of recovery, small shoots of native plants breaking through the soil where Solanum vitae had been eradicated. Yet Ethan couldn't help but feel uneasy. Something about the way the plant had fought back troubled him deeply. Back on the ship, Rachel voiced her concerns during a quiet moment in the lab. That plant, it wasn't just growing. It was adapting, learning, almost like it had a mind of its own. Lisa nodded, her brow furrowed. And those roots, if even one survived, it could start all over again. Jake leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You think it's still out there? Somewhere deep underground?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted, "but I wouldn't rule it out." Ethan entered the room, overhearing the conversation. "We did everything we could," he said firmly. "For now, that's enough. But we'll keep an eye on Zoreth 7, just in case." As the Vanguard drifted further into space, the crew tried to focus on their next mission, but the memory of Solanum vitae lingered in their minds, a reminder of how fragile balance truly was. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, a single dormant seed floated silently through the void, carried by cosmic winds toward an unknown destination. The Vanguard sailed through the endless void of space, its crew weary but hopeful after their recent victory. Yet beneath the surface, unease lingered. Ethan spent most of his time in the command chair, staring out at the stars as if searching for answers. Rachel worked tirelessly in the lab, analyzing samples they'd collected from Zorath 7, while Lisa tinkered with the ship's systems, ensuring everything was in working order. Jake kept watch over the ship's scanners, though there was little to see beyond the emptiness of space. Vinar, the young Kryllos scientist who had joined them, struggled to adjust to life aboard the human vessel. His large eyes darted around constantly, taking in every detail of the unfamiliar technology. Despite his nervousness, he was eager to learn, asking countless questions about Earth and its people. "Your species is fascinating," he said one evening during dinner. "You create things not just for survival, but for understanding." Ethan smiled faintly. "We're curious by nature. Sometimes that curiosity gets us into trouble, though." Rachel nodded, glancing at the datapad in her hands. "Like Solanum Vitae. We thought we were helping, but instead, we nearly destroyed an entire planet." Vinar lowered his gaze, his antennae twitching slightly. "It wasn't your fault. My people dismissed you because of pride. Perhaps we could have worked together sooner." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Jake rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys. "We've got something on the scanners," he announced. "It's small, but it's moving fast, heading straight for us." Ethan stood up immediately. "Can you identify it?" "Not yet," Jake replied. "But it's not like anything I've seen before." Moments later, a small object appeared on the view screen, a floating seed, glowing faintly with an eerie light. It drifted toward the Vanguard, seemingly drawn by some unseen force. Rachel gasped, recognizing it instantly. "That's Solanum Vitae," she whispered. "Somehow, it survived." The crew stared in stunned silence as the seed hovered outside the ship, pulsating gently. Then, without warning, it latched onto the hull, embedding itself firmly. The ship shuddered slightly, and the lights flickered. "What's happening?" Vinar asked, his voice trembling. "It's trying to get inside," Lisa said, checking the engineering console. "I think it's feeding off our energy." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. "We can't let it grow here. If it spreads, it'll consume the ship, and us with it." Jake grabbed a plasma cutter from the wall. "Let me go out there and cut it loose." "No," Ethan said firmly. "It's too dangerous. We need another way." Rachel stepped forward, holding up the chemical disperser they'd used on Zorath 7. "If we modify this, maybe we can neutralize it directly from the outside." Lisa nodded. "I'll help. We'll need to vent part of the hull to deploy it safely." Working quickly, the team prepared the disperser, attaching it to a robotic arm designed for external repairs. As Lisa operated the controls, Ethan watched anxiously as the arm extended toward the seed. The glowing plant seemed to sense the threat, vibrating violently against the hull. "Hold steady," Lisa muttered, guiding the arm closer. With a final push, the disperser made contact, releasing a burst of chemicals onto the seed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the seed began to shrivel, its glow fading until it collapsed into a harmless husk. The crew exhaled in relief, but their victory felt hollow. Ethan turned to Rachel. "How did it even get here? Wasn't it supposed to be dead?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "But it's clear now. This plant isn't just surviving. It's evolving. Adapting to survive in space, of all places." Vinar looked at them, his expression grave. "Then this isn't over. If even one seed escapes, it could find another world. Another chance to grow." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. "We stopped it once, and we'll stop it again if we have to. But we can't do this alone. The galaxy needs to know what we're dealing with." As the Vanguard continued its journey, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Somewhere in the vastness of space, other seeds might already be drifting, carried by cosmic winds, or hidden within the wreckage of forgotten worlds. The battle against Solanum Vitae had been won, but the war was far from over. The crew of the Vanguard gathered in the ship's meeting room, the mood tense and somber. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on its smooth surface as he addressed the group. "We stopped the seed from taking over the ship," he began, his voice steady but firm. "But Rachel's right. This isn't just a plant anymore. It's evolving, adapting faster than we can predict. If even one seed survives, it could spread to another planet." Rachel nodded, her expression serious. "And it won't stop there. Each time it grows, it gets stronger, smarter. We need to warn others before it finds a new home." Jake leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "How do we even start? The galaxy is huge. There's no way we can track every seed floating out there." Lisa chimed in, tapping a finger against the table. "What if we focus on planets with similar conditions to Zorath 7? That's where it thrives best. Maybe we can monitor those areas and prevent it from spreading." Venar, who had been quiet until now, spoke up hesitantly. "My people, they might not listen, but other species might. If we share what we've learned, maybe someone will take action." Ethan considered this for a moment. "It's worth a try. Vinar, you know more about the Krillos than anyone here. Do you think they'd help us, even after everything that happened?" Vinar hesitated, his antennae twitching slightly. "Kralthix wouldn't admit fault, but some of my kind might see the danger. If we present evidence, show them how close we came to disaster, then that's our next step," Ethan said decisively. "We'll send warnings to nearby systems and ask for their cooperation. This isn't just our problem, it's everyone's." Over the next few days, the crew worked tirelessly to compile data about Solanum Vitae. Rachel analyzed the samples they'd brought back from Zorath 7, documenting its growth patterns and mutations. Lisa helped create detailed maps of potential high-risk planets, marking areas where the plant could thrive. Jake handled communications, sending encrypted messages to nearby colonies and space stations. Despite their efforts, the response was mixed. Some species dismissed the warnings outright, calling the threat exaggerated or impossible. Others promised to investigate but offered little concrete support. Only a handful agreed to join the effort, sharing resources and information to track any signs of the plant. One evening, as the crew reviewed the responses, Ethan noticed something odd on the scanner readings. A faint signal, almost imperceptible, pulsed intermittently in the distance. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to the screen. Jake frowned, zooming in on the signal. "Looks like some kind of distress call. It's coming from a derelict ship adrift in the asteroid belt." "Could be a trap," Lisa warned, "or it could be nothing." Ethan shook his head. "We can't ignore it. Not when lives might be at stake." The Vanguard changed course, heading toward the source of the signal. As they approached, the wreck of an old cargo vessel came into view, battered and scarred by years of neglect. Its hull was covered in thick vines, glowing faintly in the dim light. "That's not natural," Rachel whispered, her voice tight with fear. "It's Solanum Vitae." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Looks like we found another seed. Let's move carefully." The team suited up and boarded the derelict ship, weapons ready. Inside, the air was thick with decay, the walls overtaken by twisting vines. The plant seemed dormant, but the faint hum of energy suggested otherwise. Vinar scanned the area with his portable device. "There's something alive here," he said softly. "Not just the plant." Suddenly, movement caught their attention, a figure stumbling through the shadows. It was humanoid, its body emaciated and covered in green tendrils. The person collapsed before they could speak, their eyes wide with terror. Rachel rushed forward, checking for vital signs. "They're alive, but barely. The plant, it's consuming them." Ethan knelt beside the survivor, his voice gentle. Who are you? What happened here? The stranger managed a weak whisper. Took root inside. Then their eyes close, leaving the crew to piece together the horrifying truth. As they carried the survivor back to the Vanguard, the realization hit them hard. Solanum vitae wasn't just spreading, it was infecting living beings, turning them into hosts for its seeds. The battle wasn't over, it had only begun. Back aboard the Vanguard, the crew worked quickly to stabilize the survivor they had rescued from the derelict ship. The stranger, a human man, was barely conscious, his body frail and covered in pulsating green tendrils that seemed to burrow into his skin. Rachel examined him carefully, her hands trembling as she used medical tools to remove the vines. "These aren't just growing on him," she said, her voice filled with dread. "They're inside him, spreading through his bloodstream." Ethan watched silently, his jaw clenched. "Can you save him?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "If we cut them out, it might kill him. But if we leave them, he'll die anyway." Lisa stepped forward, holding up a scanner. "The plant is using him as a host. Look at this. It's producing spores right under his skin." She pointed to faint glowing spots beneath the man's flesh. If those spores release, they could spread to the rest of the ship. Jake tightened his grip on his weapon. "Then we need to contain him. Now." Vinar hesitated, his antennae twitching nervously. "Containment won't stop the infection. We need to find a way to neutralize the plant before it spreads further." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "Rachel, focus on treating him. Lisa, help her modify the chemical disperser we used before. Make it safe for biological use. Jake, seal off this section of the ship. No one goes in or out without my permission." As the team sprang into action, Ethan turned his attention back to the survivor. Despite his weakened state, the man's eyes fluttered open briefly. "Please," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "Don't let it grow." "We won't," Ethan promised, though he wasn't sure how true that was. Hours passed as Rachel and Lisa worked tirelessly to adapt the disperser. They tested different combinations of chemicals, searching for a solution that would target the plant without harming the host. Finally, they settled on a formula that showed promise. "It's not perfect," Rachel said, wiping sweat from her brow. "But it should slow down the infection long enough to give us a chance." With the modified disperser ready, they administered the treatment to the survivor. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the glowing spots beneath his skin began to fade. The tendrils loosened their grip, retreating slightly as the plant's hold weakened. "It's working," Lisa whispered, relief washing over her face. But their victory was short-lived. As the treatment progressed, the plant reacted violently. The man convulsed, his body racked with pain as the vines retracted sharply, pulling free from his flesh. Blood pooled around him, and his breathing grew shallow. "It's killing him to survive," Rachel realized, her voice shaking. "The plant knows we're trying to destroy it." Despite their efforts, the man succumbed to his injuries, leaving the crew devastated. Ethan stood over the body, his fists clenched. "We couldn't save him," he muttered bitterly. "But we can't let this happen to anyone else." Vinar spoke up, his tone resolute. "This proves the plant is more dangerous than we thought. It's not just consuming worlds. It's turning living beings into carriers. If it reaches a populated planet, millions could be infected." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then we need to act fast. Vinar, send a message to every species we've contacted so far. Tell them what we've discovered. Warn them about the spores and the risk of infection." While Vinar handled communications, the rest of the team focused on securing the Vanguard. They incinerated the man's body to ensure no trace of the plant remained, then ran scans on the ship to confirm there were no lingering spores. Every corner was checked, every vent sealed shut. Finally, the crew gathered in the command room, exhausted but determined. "We've done all we can here," Ethan said, addressing the group. "But this isn't over. Solanum vitae is still out there, spreading. adapting. If we want to stop it, we'll have to take the fight to it. Rachel looked at him, her expression fierce. Where do we start? Ethan stared at the view screen, where the stars stretched endlessly before them. We follow the trail, find every seed, every infected world, and wipe them out before they can grow. This plant mocked us once. Not again. The vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it plunged deeper into the unknown. The battle against Solanum Vitae was far from over, but neither was the resolve of those who fought it. The vanguard traveled across the galaxy, its crew united by a single mission, to stop Solanum Vitae before it could infect another world. Ethan stood on the bridge, staring at the stars as the ship moved silently through space. Each planet they visited brought new challenges, seeds hidden in jungles, spores drifting through asteroid fields, even entire ecosystems overtaken by the relentless plant. But with every victory, the crew grew stronger, learning how to adapt and fight back. Rachel spent countless hours refining their tools, improving the chemical disperser and developing protective suits to shield them from spores. Lissa worked tirelessly to upgrade the ship's systems, ensuring the vanguard was ready for whatever came next. Jake kept watch over the scanners, his sharp eyes catching even the faintest signs of danger. And Viner, once an outsider, had become an invaluable member of the team, sharing his knowledge of alien biology and helping strategize their next moves. Their efforts began to pay off. Word of their mission spread, and slowly other species joined the fight. Ships from distant colonies arrived to assist, bringing supplies, technology, and warriors willing to stand against the growing threat. Together, they formed a coalition, a fragile alliance united by survival. On one such mission, the crew discovered a massive infestation on a remote moon. The plant had consumed nearly everything, turning the barren landscape into a twisted jungle of glowing vines and towering roots. At the center of it all was a pulsating core, larger and more complex than anything they'd encountered before. "This is it," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the task ahead. "If we destroy this, we might finally turn the tide." The team prepared carefully, donning their upgraded suits and arming themselves with dispersers loaded with Rachel's latest formula. As they approached the core, the plant reacted violently, lashing out with thick vines and releasing clouds of spores. The air grew thick with tension as they fought their way forward, each step harder than the last. Finally, they reached the heart of the infestation. Ethan held up the disperser, aiming it at the glowing mass. "Do it," he ordered, and Rachel activated the device. A stream of chemicals surged into the core, causing it to shudder and collapse. The ground shook violently as the plant died, its vines crumbling into ash. When the dust settled, the moon was silent once more. The crew stood together, battered but victorious. Ethan looked around at his team, pride swelling in his chest. "We did it," he said simply. "But we can't stop now. There may still be seeds out there." Viner nodded, his antennae twitching slightly. "You've shown me something important. That strength isn't about power or arrogance. It's about working together, no matter how small or weak you seem." Ethan smiled faintly. "And sometimes, the smallest things can change the universe." As the vanguard left the moon behind, the coalition continued its work, hunting down every trace of Solanum Vitae. Planets were saved, ecosystems restored, and lives protected. But the crew knew the fight wasn't truly over. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a single seed might still drift, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Kralfix, leader of the Kryllos, eventually sent a message to the vanguard. It was brief but sincere. "Your actions have taught us humility. Perhaps there is value in cooperation after all." Ethan read the message aloud to the crew, who exchanged quiet smiles. They had proven that humanity's ingenuity and resilience could make a difference, even when faced with overwhelming odds. In the end, the story of Solanum Vitae became a cautionary tale told across the galaxy. It reminded everyone that even the smallest creations could hold immense power for better or worse. And as the Vanguard sailed onward, its crew remained vigilant, knowing their journey was far from over.